and welcome to the Advanced Age Role-Playing Gamers talk show Leftovers. Before we get into tonight's content, I just want to make kind of a serious thing. So one of our gaming, some of our gaming friends, there are a couple, one of them had a medical emergency today and is currently in intensive care. We haven't played with them in a while. I think the last time I saw them was about 4 years ago, at my 50th birthday party. But all our hopes, thoughts, prayers, anything you want. We're hoping that everything turns out okay. And so, it's getting old is not great. We just want to send that out. So on that heavy note, we'll try to get back onto what we were trying to do. So we're going to continue kind of where we picked up last time we were on. We had a little bit of a break. We had some folks who were on vacation. We had the 4th of July. And so last time we were discussing some of the differences between what it's like to run D&D versus GURPS versus Dragonbane with Malcolm. And right at the end, someone decided to throw a Savage bomb into the mix. And what I am happy is this has taken, let's see, we're only in our 4th year, and we have somehow been able to finally draw another one of our group onto the stage, and that's James. I'd like to introduce James tonight. He doesn't have a camera, so he'll be a voice only. We're kind of, not everybody. We have Legos, we have shapeless bodies, but James is a part of our the same gaming group that we talk about all the time, way back in the late 80s, early 90s. And so we're really great to have him on. James, you want to say hi?
Evening, everyone.
Yeah, and so I thought that, and if you guys don't know that, it would be really great to have a normal, level-headed conversation with Malcolm about a gaming topic. And then I said, you know what? No, let's have James on. And so he's on because after the last episode, he hopped on. I sent him the link, and what did we spend like another half an hour, 45 minutes talking about stuff? And it was like, okay, all right, let's get some spicy conversation going. So let's just jump right in. Savage. Let's talk about Savage Worlds.
Okay. I don't know where to start with Savage Worlds other than
how'd you get introduced to it?
Savage World had always been sort of on the periphery for me in a way. It sort of was like, because I had, for many years, I'd primarily been doing a lot of GURPS, and having a generic universal role-playing system that had so many supplements that would allow you to adapt anything to it, I wasn't really looking into another, a gaming engine that was adaptable. As a matter of fact, I remember when like the whole entire D20 system came out, I was very resistant to it entirely because I was like, I've got one. I don't need another one. I'm fine, and I was sort of doing that, but I had picked up a Savage, like somehow, I don't know how it happened. I ended up with a Savage World book, and I was looking for another system to try and do a mech game, game, because I've run a lot of mech games and gone through a lot of systems, be it Palladium, and then to GURPS, and then various versions of GURPS and other things, trying to make a mech system work, and was didn't like couldn't convert what I wanted to BattleTech to make it work. So I was like, and they had a system in their Space Companion, so I said I'll give it a try, and I ran it, and it was absolutely just perfect. It was fast. It was fast enough pace that I wanted. There was enough detail that people were that I had enough crunchiness that I was enjoying it, and the players were able to get their whole battle through as well as role playing a game all within the time period we had set. And I was like, I never get that done. And for the same and a very similar thing, I was also looking for a super system because I wasn't very pleased with GURPS superheroes. I just couldn't get it to fit right and get the real 4-color comic book feel that I wanted. A lot of it can be very lethal, and in 3rd edition there was a lot of power climbs depending on which powers you chose, and other times you were completely useless depending on what powers you chose and the points you dumped. So I wanted something a bit more usable, and we were coming up on a geek weekend, and I decided I was going to run a supers game, and I'd found out that, they had a supers companion. So I was very pleased with their with how the mechs came out one year. So I did them, and this may be reversed, but anyway, I did super. I went out to try and do a supers game, which had, I think, no less. I think there was a ton of us that year because I invited
It was
my
a big group.
There
I
were 8 players.
my Thursday night game over there as well to the Geek Weekend.
Yeah, that game there were 8 players.
It was like 8 players, 8 superheroes, which is, well, as I
7 of them were awake the whole time.
later find out that's going to be my norm, but that we had, you had 8 superheroes, and of course all the villains they were going to be combating, and doing that in a supers game, something I would never be able to pull off in groups the way I'd wanted to, and therefore I was able to do in Savage Worlds. I really had a great time running that game and running the superheroes. So then I thought, it is an optional system. It's very, I could use this. I like the system. And then when I moved to Tennessee, I found out that practically nobody played GURPS. There was like maybe 4 guys who played a game that started at like 1 a.m. in the morning and went until 4. And I was like, I can't do that. I tried. I would get off work and then go there. I can't do that. That was not sustainable. And everybody else was just doing 5th edition D&D. And I was like, so I, just went right into 5th edition D&D and started doing that. But I really wanted to set them to do other games in. And then, they came out, then Savage World came out with their Adventure Edition. And I picked it up and I thought, this is pretty much fun. And I enjoyed it before. I'll go ahead and get the supers and everything else for it. And they're still coming out with the stuff, but I really like the system overall and use it for a lot of my one-shot games. So my one-shot horror games, for simple adventure games. It's a very easy system for players who don't know much about role playing to get into. And my gaming group, when I first, the first solid gaming group that I had and still do have when I came here, was like I had literally 50-50 as far as my players. Half of them had never played a game before. The other half had been playing for for a couple of years in various different games. And so it was one of the first game systems that bridged them best, that everyone was very pleased with. And the one thing about it is a very sort of, it is kind of nice to have a game. It's a game system where the player characters, regardless of who they are sort of, de facto heroes of that game. They are the main characters of the story. They have the extra edge. They are, as they call it, the wild cards. So they get the special die, extra die to sort of make sure they succeed. They do have these sort of like metagame, influencing things called tokens called basically bennies to change destiny or to sort of nudge the scales of destiny in their favor if they'd like, and they can. And so it boosted a lot of confidence in my newer players. They had played D&D. We just came off of a long D&D campaign, and not really long. That's incorrect. They came out of a D&D campaign. It probably for them seemed long. And one thing I found is a lot of people didn't play campaigns that lasted more than like several months. We were like 2.5 years into this for them, and they were like, well, this has been a long campaign. Like, yeah, that's good. And but they wanted to try something new. And this, when it hit, when they planted the characters for the next game, and they saw how much agency they had and the confidence they could take more risk in doing, they took a lot more risk. They were a lot more free to do things. They felt more confident in what they could do, and therefore became more confident in playing, and their playing styles became much more, I'd say, more adventurous, which was good. And since then, I have really liked the system as far as its versatility, its ease of play. It's the nature of how you do advancement is very, because I always like it when you can choose and pick and choose where you want your character to go, which may be different than when you started off with. There is the option, depending on what rule sets you've chosen, for your character to choose a completely different path and go off that way and do it. And this is going to sound very strange, but literally it was like, I had come to this sort of conclusion that I was like, I had been a steadfast GURPS only for so long. And I gave that up and started doing D&D. And then I thought, well, you know what? This game, good D&D is my high fantasy game. If I want high fantasy, I'll do that. If I want realistic greediness, I'm definitely doing GURPS. If I want this, I can do that. I was now looking at different game systems for when I wanted to do things. And Savage World was still falling back to the default of things that if I wanted to be somewhat heroic or people to feel as if they're, like it was a cliffhangers, it was a, it was a kind of, it was a sort of just to give the players enough edge to have the confidence to do whatever it's going to be. So it started becoming that baseline game that I would probably go system to. And
Right.
and then when they came out with their fantasy companion, that pretty much put the I mean, I'm looking at all these D&D books and going, I don't even know if I'm ever going to pick them up again, because their conversion of Pathfinder was, I heard it was really good and people were raving about it. And I'm like, I like Savage Worlds, and Pathfinder was probably one of the best sort of like, I don't know what to call it, but their reinterpretation of D&D 3.5 was utterly mind-blowing and blew the whole thing out of the water and changed the whole industry. But yeah, but so I thought if they've done a good job of converting other people are really excited about it, maybe I'll give it a look. But I never got around to getting to the to Pathfinder, because I was like, it's still, it's still in some ways it's very D&D, and I have D&D already. And then they came up with their fantasy companion, which did use a lot of the things they pulled from their Pathfinder, and I was just like, crap. This is probably going to be the end of my, for high fantasy, I'll be pretty much happy to use Savage World, because I literally, even my players have played, when they talk fondly about the D&D game, but have no intentions of going back to Dungeons and Dragons, which is, I'm fine with, because that's okay. You're allowed. We should be able to move on. And the only thing that's really said is that, I only thought about maybe converting everybody's character over to Savage Worlds if they wanted to go back to that world again.
Well, you mentioned something about being heroic, and I think that's, so I know we've been talking about this too, and I think we've decided as a group that when we eventually do go back to, because I intend to finish Sex, Drugs, and Saving Throws, there's one more chapter, I think we're going to port it over and run it in the Savage World setting for that very reason, is because I that's not a game I can run in a lethal system, right? Because it's a silly game. It's a heroic game. It's a
can't,
character, right. So,
but
I
it
agree
also
with
is a
you.
game that sort of there needs to be some crazy antics that
Yep.
goes on, and there should be some way to reward or push these things to go that crazy level. And I think Savage Worlds will do it. Yet you will still be able to keep a lot of the trappings that you have from Dungeons and Dragons that can be translated over. Their fantasy companion is a really good resource and does a really good job. It even does a really good job of setting up templates. Like if you were bringing over characters, here's how you would build that class in the Savage World system, And so it's very nice and very flexible, and and I do like it. So as a matter of fact, that's why, in this coming year, it's my hope to go back and redo the Savage World superhero game.
Well, there's another exclusive. Did you not know out there that so last year, I think it was last year, right? We started. Was it 2 years?
Yeah, because it was before he was born.
Oh my gosh!
It was literally the months before my son was born, and going up to that, it got crazy. And
we actually recorded, I think, 1 or 2 episodes. Yeah. Malcolm was running a superheroes game, and then life threw a little package and that messed that up. But on our docket for 2025, that's one of the 2 big stories we're looking at doing. So if anyone's kind of interested in what's next after Dragonbane, we are looking at 2 major stories for our primary. One is a revisit to our Twilight 2000 story with Nathan running, and then we are going to get in and we're going to knock out this Supers game for Savage at Restart what Malcolm had done. I want to jump real quick because we do have James on. James,
yeah, sorry, James.
Were you Malcolm just, I know, an hour later. Thanks, James. How did you, when did you first play Savage, James?
Geek Weekend, those years when Malcolm ran first the mech and then the Supers game. That's really all I've ever done in Savage Worlds as far as I can remember. I've never done anything fantasy or non-Supers modern in Savage Worlds.
Didn't we do it?
Didn't we do it Lonnie's? Didn't we did it? That's the first time I ever played was at Lonnie's Beach House. It was like a Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of feel game.
Yeah, it was.
I
It was
swore that
yeah.
was.
I might not have been there for that because I don't remember that.
Yeah,
We also did your dark Phase World reboot in Savage Worlds at
Yeah.
first before
I
you
did,
switched
yeah.
it
So
over to Starfinder.
yeah, like Malcolm, I struggled with sort of like systems, right? So I had the old Rifts, the Three Galaxies campaign in the Palladium setting, and I was looking for a change as well. Not that I don't love that system. It's it's. I was looking. I don't know. I was trying something else. So I looked at the D20 system as well. And then we ran it for a very short period of time in Savage Worlds, and I liked it. It had that nice feel to it, for like heroic stuff. And they actually did a bunch of conversions for Rifts, but then Starfinder came out, and I really liked that, so I shifted to that. But let's get back to Savage. So, all right, what are your thoughts about it, James? As far as playability, have you enjoyed
I
it?
mean, the little bit that I've played Savage Worlds, it seems pretty enjoyable. One of the two things that I said might ever get me on the podcast was Malcolm running a Supers game, so or him restarting Gold Sparrow, which was an old GURPS game that Malcolm ran for years, GURPS fantasy game. Restarting that in any shape or form might get me to do a podcast. So who knows? I may start showing up next year. Hell,
All
I've
right.
already made 2 characters for Malcolm's Supers game that he's not going to
Yes.
run for 6 months or more. And I'm working on 2 others. So
It's well, I am. Thank you. I am really. Oh, but yeah, I will. We will. I'm definitely gonna run the Supers game. I'm gonna. That's my plan and goal to try and get that done. I probably will not be. Well, you know what? I'm not gonna say never about Gold Sparrow. That's foolish. I will simply say
that's another session.
It's been a while, and we'll talk about Gold Sparrow and that game. And
we could never go back to the same characters.
And it's alternate dimension version that
Yeah,
I
I
ran
mean,
here in D&D called Silver Heron. So we'll talk about that. I had this whole entire thing about naming my fantasy games after bird things.
birds.
Because it's like the crowned swan, Gold Sparrow, Silver Heron. There was some other one. Anyway, Century Sparrow. Anyway, whatever about that.
Well, so when you brought it up, so we're going to be playing a Supers game using the Savage, the SWADE, right?
Yes, the
SWADE version,
we're
right?
using the Adventure Edition.
So can you tell us a little bit about what the setting for this Supers games, or where it's
Well,
going to be, the world it's going to be set in?
Well, this Supers game will be a 4-colored game. It's four colors as far as its overall tone and set, meaning that it will be very much like having a feel more of the Golden Age comic books as opposed to later comic books that came out, later comic book series, or even current comic books. It's not going to be nearly as edgy in the same sense. There will be some breathing room for the classic sort of not for the sort of classic sort of general hero genre as far as superhero genre. I know that it is my intent to try and avoid sliding into boys or something like that. Those are very dark tales that have a specific theme and a tone to them, which in truth, you can do in Savage Worlds, and they tell you they're very helpful as far as helping you get the tone right for your superheroes game or any game you're doing by adding or taking away certain set rules or putting certain caveats in there. But I wanted something to be more like very similar to the actual sort of comic books that we actually were out when we were growing up, and so therefore the hero system and heroes would be like that. Because
I appreciate that.
I don't think I can keep up. Is like I mean,
it's a hard show to watch.
It can be, and it's
a great show.
It's a great show, but it's a hard show.
Yeah.
And it's something that I know I don't consider that to be a superhero campaign. I wouldn't consider that a superhero game if we were playing characters in that game. That is a sort of like I mean, it has the same sort of feel to me as like a zombie survivalist or alien invasion sort of game. You are put against some insurmountable force, which is not only just the the nature of propaganda, government, and corporate, and so forth, but these superpowered beings that have whose moral compass is totally gone, and yours is gone as well because they've changed the balance of the world entirely, or just personifications of the current world we live in. And for me, I like to sort of like just get a little bit out of our world to play a game, or at least the game that I'm running. So I'm fine with leaving the most sinister parts of a superhero world.
Well, I see behind you. You've got I think that's James's number one hero, right?
Oh, the
behind
Captain
you on the
America?
wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a Superman guy, which I know you guys make fun of me, right? James
Boring.
Yeah.
Boring.
I like just a good hero, right?
And the thing is, I see nothing wrong with liking a good hero, and I think that we're I know people are saying that most times you're playing a superhero game, you're just doing this, you're just rehashing what's already been out there. And I said, that could be true said about so many genres, that it's a rehashing of something that you've done before. But there is not completely something wrong with going back and sort of touch tones on something you used to remember, or something that you liked, or something about it. So I like, for instance, is this game for everyone to play? Maybe not, but I think people will enjoy watching it. And I think what happens is we'll find it being a blend of, a four-color campaign with lots of shades of gray in between the bars of color, and it'll be fun.
And dick jokes,
and probably more dick jokes than I really want to even think of happening. But
just long as the new superhero game doesn't have any undead presidents running around.
No,
I will not be reprising my role as Teddy Roosevelt.
That was
that's my.
I did not run that game.
Yes, you did.
Yes, I did. Oh my god,
you did.
It must have been. It was the yucca juice. Anyway, so this game will so it'll be a sort of four-color superhero game. The world that it's going to be in is of course going to be somewhat of partially, obviously have a fictional history that's made up of with the inclusion of superheroes in our timeline, how that changes it. It will incorporate a lot of the rogues gallery you find in the back of the superheroes companion book. It is not it's not used. I'm not using the Savage Worlds timeline because they have a specific sort of timeline. They have a timeline for their games and supplements that will come out and enhance for it from their previous editions, and that are also being updated for the new editions as well. I will not be sort of using that, but I will be using the heroes from it. So if people want to watch it to see how those characters are used or how those villains powers manifest, they can, they're more than welcome. Just so it's going to be my own sort of timeline and story, using those characters incorporated and some of their backgrounds incorporated into this timeline and story. Which I don't know if we're going to have something like a anyway. But
what are so when you're doing that with a historical? So I'm taking it's Earth, right?
Yeah, it will be.
About what year is it set in?
It will actually probably be set a couple of years back.
Okay.
Unless I do have 6 months to update the timeline, but in a way, it's because originally it was set up to start in 2022, and I think obviously it's 2 years later, so it's like pushing that forward. I could, but part of me doesn't really want to, only because it's not really. I think having an idea of where things go may be helpful as far as our mundane world to the super world, and see how they may change, and it'll give people a chance to sort of it will be after the pandemic too, you're asking, but as it was originally, and which did have an impact on when I wrote that original timeline. So I'm thinking that may have to be updated, but we'll see. But right now I'm planning it to happen probably like at the earliest. I mean, the earliest will be 22. The latest would be like 20 into 23. I don't think it needs to be that far back, but there's a superhero world that works and that has completely different, has a very just slightly off centered history from Mars. It's like it's slightly off from different from Mars in the multiverse of things, because you have superheroes running around. The one thing it comes about is that we have less heroes than we had just like 5 to 6 years ago. and this is because of a particular, well, it's a very, like at the time it was affected by a sort of pandemic that also affected supers as well, taking away their powers, or muting them. So the heroes making up the team are a hero team that's sort of pulled together to sort of just bolster the overall number of hero teams out there. And it will be, and the government, the way it's regulating was having them sponsored and having them monitored and so forth. It's a very interesting sort of way of, you have a team, but there are all these sort of some safeguards put in by the government, and then as time goes on, and with administrative changes and disruptions and so forth, those become grayer, and we have to figure out and heroes stepping up to fill in the gaps that left by other heroes who are gone. So it's kind of that. It will be in the fictional city that used to be Luz, Delaware, but is now known as Monument City. So it's happening in the bustling and amazing state of Delaware.
So the heroes. So in this setting, heroes are sanctioned. They're okay, but they're sort of. Can you be a freelance, or does the government prefer you?
They're sort of sanctioned, but they sort of have a clearinghouse where you have to turn in certain amount of information about yourself, so that your testimony and your evidence presented in court can be considered that, as opposed to just hearsay and can be thrown out. It's basically in order to they sort of like decided that since there's so many superheroes in the course of this world's history, there had to be a way of codifying and dealing with the vigilante sort of element of it. How do we mitigate laws that handle this, and where does it fall, and the impact it will have on what they what I would we would consider true law enforcement. How do the police deal with this? How does the FBI and everything else? And there are, organizations at various levels, locally to government, which I didn't really want to get into that, but I had it there in the background to sort of add some realism as far as, there would be some stopgaps to try and prevent craziness, because literally they just run around just beating up people and turning them over to the cops.
Right.
There needs to be something like, well, who, what, and the one thing of dreadedly having to go to court for anything. So that kind of stuff. So I do have, there are those, but generally there's a lot of freelance superheroes, which are sort of labeled. And I almost have a sort of like thing where how they see a hero is generally based on what they've done and how they've done it, and how they're dressed. Like, like if you're running around with a cape and so forth, and you're beating up a known villain, people will generally say that's a superhero, regardless of how good or how successful you are. If you happen to be running around in a trench coat and a fedora, and you only look around at night, that's probably a vigilante, at the best, which is just a villain that hasn't, I don't know. He might not even pay his taxes. We don't know, who he is. There's something about it, it's that kind of thing. So the heroes fall along the hero group of heroes that have been gathered sort of fall on this scattered line, but are trying to get a bit of legitimacy by being a part of a government sanctioned sponsored team, which basically means that, in the case of your team, someone very rich has said they will sponsor the superhero team and pay the liability cost of insurance for damages done if they patrol things. Yeah, it's insurance.
Right. I can't even imagine like insuring superheroes, right?
Yeah,
like,
there's this one great meme where it just shows this guy just staring off from the distance, utterly distraught, when you realize, you just watched the Hulk throw your car and miss the villain. It's just like, oh God. So that aside, but yeah, so that's how it works. It's basically, so you guys will be, the heroes will be sponsored by a rich billionaire who's eccentric and weird, of course. Who's
as they are,
who has, and your equipment he's acquired, because he probably is something of you're getting the impression that, the impression they will be, that the heroes will eventually get is that they're more of a tax write-off than him seriously wanting to have a superhero team, because technically they are. So
nice.
So basically, you're getting an old base and, your old equipment and all kinds of stuff. But you will be, the thing is, the call will come, and you guys will, the heroes will stay, hopefully will step up to the task and prove themselves to be far better and win the
Of course we
hearts
will. It'll
of
be
the
great.
public. Dick jokes all aside.
Yeah. Is this a continuation? So I'm trying to remember, because I know we have played multiple different supers systems over the decades, right?
So
all the way back to, I think our first supers game,
Heroes Unlimited,
which we just for fun.
Yeah, we did it because it was a D&D break, and we were like, "Oh, gotta do something else." And
Mystic Mom,
right? Mystic Mom, the Emerald Knight,
yeah,
Crimson Guardian.
Yeah. We're like, yeah, it was.
So that was. Is it that universe or any of the others?
Here's what I did. I took a good portion of most of the universe, most of the superhero games we had played in the past, and it integrated them into one long timeline. And so in the timeline, there will be references to older, old characters in previous games that they'll be seen there. There'll be like, you'll have, there's even some more, even with the more recent games coming more recently in the timeline. So, for instance, there will be like, mentions of Emerald Fury and Dr. Redemption and more recent timelines. Okay, that's the garage.
That would be it. There's the.
Hold on a second.
That's all right. The city is named after one of the heroes from the old Heroes Unlimited game? The original Heroes Unlimited game, Monument City, isn't that named after Monument?
It's named after Monument and his heroic
sacrifice.
While you get your, so James, what character did you play in that original game? You were
Crimson Guardian,
right? Which is basically like
until he had his head
port, right?
Well, Captain America port with some fast speed. And a little bit of growth. It was a weird mix of random powers. But I ran him until he got his head bit off by a giant robotic bulldog.
One thing I can say is it's always wary when you let another guest GM take over your game for a while. Sometimes things can turn from being superheroic to super scary.
Scary.
It all worked out good because Crimson Guardian getting decapitated led to me making my favorite superhero character, Honor Guard, that I have played in every
version of superheroes.
Every game system that we've played, I have made Honor Guard in all of those.
Is this the Archer?
No, that is the Captain America character.
Oh,
no,
Black
Archer. The Archer was Black Archer for Marvel. And he would have a PR nightmare in this game because he got civilians away from falling masonry and everything by temporarily disintegrating them.
And you disintegrated them? So
yes. Temporarily disintegrated them to avoid getting smashed by falling debris. And I regularly shot people with healing arrows.
Healing arrows.
Yes.
Just look.
I don't think I played with him, but I heard the stories. I love the idea of like
he was
temporarily disintegrating people to save them.
Hey, it worked.
Just looks so. I mean, like you shot him with arrow, they suddenly just disappeared, and you're like, "Oh my god!" And then someone was injured.
So if you've played the other character, have you tried to create a Savage version of him?
In the Geek Weekend game, I played the kid version of him.
Yeah, you did.
Okay. I forget what I called him. The Guardian or the Protector or something. I forget what it was.
Something, yeah.
But yeah, I made him up in the Geek Weekend version, in the old Savage World Super system.
Okay, yeah. So this will be interesting. Well, it's interesting. You say it's the same universe. I don't know if you have any plans for it or not, but that could make some interesting cameo possibilities.
That could, and I
maybe not
be surprised.
Although I don't think we could pull from all the original actors.
No, not all of them.
Not all.
And yeah, God rest their souls. And some I will not. I just don't like. I mean,
yeah. But oh, wait. Hold on. Oh, look who's here.
Dr. Redemption. Which he has a I think he's a.
It is Dr. Redemption.
Yeah, there was a there's a major, I guess, and you guys, the players will get get a copy of the timeline, which will have a thing in there about him and other people. But yeah, there's a chance for cameos for old characters, definitely, and I'd be curious to see how they appear in a different system. Sometimes, in some cases it'll be rather simple, other cases more complicated, but it'd still be a lot of fun to see them come back if a character wants to do a cameo with an old character, as long as they haven't been written out, or we won't get too many complaints of copyright infringement. We'll see.
Yeah, one of the characters I've already made for the Supers game has tie-ins to other characters from Malcolm's past superhero games.
Oh, that's very cool. Tier. Oh, so we've been joined by Tier, who's been lurking in our chat, who decided to put some pants on and join us on video. Well,
more like come home from kids hockey, but same thing,
okay. We hope
I'm a hockey parent now. That means long hours in a freezing cold rink when it's super hot outside.
Well, that's not a bad place to be. Yeah. So Tier, have you played any of the Savage Hero games at Geek Weekend, or have you played any of the Hero games?
I played the Savage Heroes when we started the campaign that is going to be reset and restarted.
Yep.
I've got that experience with it. I played some other Savage Worlds games. I really enjoyed them. I like the ease, the simplicity, which Savage Worlds takes a complicated system and brings it down to a more user-friendly level. It takes something where, you've got, Shift Z, Shift Y modified by this to, all right, okay, you hit, or you don't, or tell me what stunt you do. Like, you don't have to get super, super, super complicated. It allows for a little bit more role play too.
That is definitely true. I mean, I kept thinking, it just, you just go really fast and you can reach there or something. It's like sort of you're in this range, or it's kind of a big area where, in GURPS, you're so many meters and you're moving meters per second, and what's your weight and how many hit points do you have, and you're colliding with the thing at this speed. Okay, I'm gonna take all this pile of dice and roll them. You're just like, what? I mean, I think that it does a very good job of simplifying a lot of things, and its adaptability is easier to access than than similar games. As far as being supposedly, as far as being a generic or being a system to I would say a generic system or a baseline system to work from. Because they have a lot of things with basically just rule sets that you can choose to add or take away. I've run in Savage Worlds since moving here, several modern games, a horror game, science fiction game, and stuff, and even the most recent one, which was was a horror game. It was just a matter of we're taking away this ability and adding this particular thing. So, for instance, they were, it added a bit of, an edge of fear to it, because the way the fear tables could be added for this particular horror game, and damage was going to be, as far as the nature of how damage was manifest was going to have a further, have a much more dangerous sort of add on to it that I can choose to add on based on a rule set and eliminate this kind of thing that they can't do this. And it was just, it's a different way of playing, they play the game, and I'm currently in a Deadlands campaign that's been going on for some time, which is Savage Worlds, which is where Savage Worlds pretty much started. It was in Deadlands, and I'm loving it. Where we started off as kids in that game, and we're now adults, sort of dealing with retaking back our old sort of town and everything in it, and that's been going on for it's now a year and a half with breaks between them. Yeah.
What's the dead? So I am not familiar with
so Deadlands. Think of it like the sort of wild west, or wild think of it about it has both, it's sort of a horror west with, of course, with weird science too.
Oh, like Wild Wild West, but with some horror, right?
More horror than Wild West.
I actually got a better reference for you in books if you've ever read it, and I want to throw a shout out to the author. The Shotgun Tarot, or the Shotgun Tarot, or the Six Gun Arcana. strange world, like where you've got your sheriff riding through town, and he's got over, and he sees a farmer fixing his fence. Is like, hey Jeb, how's the fence? I was like, oh, after that vampire attack last week, I've got to redo this. Like nothing's off the table.
I mean, and the thing is, it's probably not quite as well. It's different depending on the where you are in the game. But yeah, we've done. I mean, like, and there's connections with certain players are tied or bound to Manitous, and there are both witchers and casters, and there's guys who can use spells to fire their use spells to their gunslinging. There's it's a sort of a weird west, and then you also have a little bit of strange science in there too, or steampunk science in there as well. And it all happens in the West. It's an alternate history, of course, and it's a very cool world. And we have a really great GM, and he's doing a fantastic job of that world. And we've played different, and we're going through various different acts of it, which take several months to go through. But but Savage World makes it a really fun system to be in, and really to play in, and you do feel really confident as far as like we've taken some ridiculous risk.
Sometimes what you mentioned earlier, so they have alternate rule sets because on the one hand you said Savage really lets you be heroic and be adventurous, but when you're playing a horror game, you kind of want to tamp that down. So
yes,
it sounds like so when they make these alternate rule sets, they've adjusted the system for the feel of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, even the base book gives you like certain things, like you can have rule sets that that the characters can get abilities way beyond their level or beyond their advancement. If it's if you're just a born hero and you're built to do things, or there are certain ways like you can have combat that can be that when you take damage, when you take a wound, that there is a deadly consequence to it. There can be games like the Benny, which is a mechanic of it, as far as being able to reroll certain damage or hits, or being able to try again on certain things or influence the story. That can literally be even taken away as not being an option in a game if you wanted to make it a bit more edgy and cold, and and limiting how, like, even like for instance, there are magic systems, like how much magic you can use and where you can use it and which ones are available. They tell you how to adjust those for particular games. Like, I was one thing in the fantasy campaign, like if you want to run Games of Thrones, here's how. This is the rule set you include, and this is other ones you don't, and you go on from there. And it's very useful as far as getting the tone of your game right. And so even with all the sort of pro player hero baseline system, there is ways to also make it a very scary, deadly system, or a darker one, and then ways to push it the completely other direction. And there are even mechanics that I don't use for certain games that are available, but because I'm like, what, that would be a bit too much. Like, for instance, like you guys will have in the Supers game, the adventure deck. So the adventure deck just sort of has almost like a card drawn at the beginning of each session of something that could possibly be a boon to you or not. Mostly it's a boon for you. Like, you're able to, I'll just take a random one just so you can see.
Yeah. What are these? Are these official cards?
Yeah, these are official cards. Okay. Yeah, official. And there's, they also occasionally with every single like genre companion book, they'll also have like, special adventure cards for like supers will be put out or something, and one for and everything else. But like, you take a random card. These adventure cards, I don't use them in, this is completely random tier. Okay. I just literally just flip the card and pull it. So do not. Okay. So like one of the cards that it was like, parlay. So basically, if you get dealt this card at the beginning of the session, your character cease fighting and can, basically he can play this card, and in the course of any particular part of the session, and all the characters will have to stop fighting and listen to the hero speak for at least 30 seconds. Others may, take defense or during this turn or whatever. The hero, this has no effect on, animals and so forth, but basically he can stop to do a parlay in the middle of it. Other ones are like, there's one with, just like, bullseye, which basically anytime in that session, you can say, play after damage is rolled, and you double the total successfully on range attacks. It just a sort of weird, sort of quirky boon that happens to make it even more over the top adventurous. I don't use it for every game, but I probably will use it for a superhero game because it's far more crazy superhero to have weird stuff. Like there's like things like you get it just seems to work with the 4-color thing to push it that much level. And there's other things, that, depending on what you want in your game, you can either include a edge or not, or so forth. And that's what I do love, its ability to change for different genres and different types of games and different feels of the game. Right now, currently, I do plan on running a science fiction military game in the future for my local group. Its tentative name is like Battlesuit Diaries, which will be about this platoon of, well, actually a squad, but a platoon of soldiers that wear power armor during this conflict. I had no, as far as right now, I'll be setting the rules on what it's going to be, like what rule sets I'll be using in Savage Worlds. But this time I haven't set that, but I can determine how gritty and dark I want it to be, depending on what I choose for that particular game and what I plan to use. And I like that. It's GURPS had that sort of thing, but you really had. It was always pretty sorry. GURPS starts off with a darker thing, and you'd have to work to lighten it up if you want to. But GURPS is one of those game systems where their rules could be very simple, and you can make them more complex by the more things you choose to add. You can make it more complex, and that's the thing is people have always looked at it and see this whole big huge bunch of rules that have to be played, and it's really a very little rules in GURPS, and you just add stuff to make it more complex, but it adds more meat and more crunchiness to it. Where Savage Worlds has, I think, the right amount of just of rules and so forth, and you can add more things onto it, but generally still only works. And it is not the most. It is not like they do have. I wouldn't say crunchy, but they do have very good methods for dealing with certain things. Like they have a really good chase method, mechanism. If you want to do a chase, they do have a really good, a really good, way of doing dynamic tasks that sort of to build up tension in a game, like defusing a bomb or rescuing people and so forth, which we'll use I plan on using. They do have things for doing social networking or how you're going to do other things. They do have stuff for that, and I'm curious what will happen with I haven't seen the science fiction companion book is not out yet, but I'm curious how they will do net running, because they plan on putting that in there. Yet but the preliminary pages I've seen for their mechs is what they call walkers is very promising. And as far as how they're dealing with damage differences between things, they come up with a mitigator for that works out really well. That makes it easy to have this sort of these things happening, but not bog it all down. And you can do it really swiftly, which I like. So they have these systems which are really good in it. And I think I'm going to try as many as I can that make sense for our Supers game when that's run. And I will use what I can in other games as necessary, it's just, so I really have enjoyed the system. And the one thing about it is, the one thing I really always loved about GURPS was building your character, like literally coming with a concept and then pulling all the elements together to make that concept. And Savage World works that same sort of way. Like it's best to probably come to the table with the concept of your character and let's see if we can build it. Let's build it. It's not where we're just randomly generate things. It doesn't do that. It's not set up that way. You sort of, since it's a point system, you are purchasing your stats and your edges and your skills and so forth. So there is a building part to it, but it's much simpler than GURPS would be, I guess, in truth. But still,
it is simpler to GURPS. But I like that it has. I like that it has like a power, right? But it's not like there's rules for a power, but there's room in there where you can make it the manifestation of that power.
The trappings of it. The trappings are the
trappings. So
the trappings is the big thing they usually. So basically, they'll give you, they'll have powers. We'll give you powers like blast, or something like that, or we'll just go with
right,
or beam, blast or
right.
Beam. Now, that's just the power, and you can get it, but you define how the trappings are manifested. So like, is that a particle beam that I'm shooting that's basically a straight line of neutron particles I'm firing, or is it a stream of fire, or is it just magical unicorn dust that I'm firing at high velocity? I'm determining the trappings of that. It could just be whatever the trappings are that I think is appropriate for my particular character is what it manifests as. It just does this. And there are ways that that you can say, oh, it does this more or whatever, but it's generally the trappings are all of yours to create and what you want to do, which means it leaves a lot open as far as how things are interpreted and how you create your character and how it will be. There's nothing saying I have to go this specific path. I don't have to buy this power to get that. Now, there are powers that are very specific in some ways, but even then, the trappings are but the trappings are all up to you. I mean, being able to see in the future is done a different ways. You can literally, it can be like I'm looking into a crystal ball, or I'm using a probability lens, or I am, getting a premonition and a vision, or or a cloud of, cloud farted off by small, small gnomes in a circle works for me, and I can see something in it after breathing it. You choose the trappings, so it's all very specific. So it allows a lot of characters sort of be the people to play the characters they really want to play and have a way of building it. And I do like that about it a lot.
There was another thing too that you might want to bring in, because I thought this was interesting, and I don't know if you do this. Is this meant for every group? But I know for our group that we're going to be running, there was a role you had us do on power level, right? So just like in GURPS or in some of these games where you buy and purchase points, there are settings, right? There's like, if you're playing every people, you have this many points. If you're playing, right? But we have this team has you had us roll a variety. Is that a homebrew?
That was a homebrewed thing, allowing people to sort of make it like we're going to randomly roll that so we can have a sort of a spread possibly of characters in different power levels that can occur. And
I got the low end.
You did. You're like a person. Like
I love it. No. I love it because like Malcolm and I worked out a great character and a good story that suits him, and like that story makes me want to play that character so badly. Even in a world with these other super powerful guys.
And understand that is a mechanic of the Super companion game, as far as superpowers coming in different power levels and how they affect it. Where like in this standard Savage games, you're usually just starting with all the same points that you can do about it, unless you choose an edge or a hindrance. Like for instance, if I happen to choose elderly, I lose some stats, but I get more points to spend in skills or something like that, or youth, the vice versa. But the superhero game, it had different levels depending on what type of game or hero you were trying to build, be it like a street level or or slightly more competent or 4-color or cosmic. And I wanted, because we often find superhero teams that have this sort of range of superheroes in it, so that's why I created that sort of random table so we see what we can get and what we can build at those levels. I had the confidence that regardless of the levels I chose, that people could build superheroes, regardless. And just so people are wondering, it was obviously a different compensation made for the lower power characters compared to the the upper power characters. Like he got things that they did not because of that. So it's still balanced. It's just the power level is different, but probably is maybe a lot smarter.
Like gumption.
Like gumption.
Gumption.
A can-do attitude.
Can-do and gumption.
Well, we're getting close to the hour. I'm just gonna real quick. If we run a minute over, it's okay. But just as an example, so James, you mentioned you've been making some characters, right? So I know there's the group, the characters. I don't know if anyone's gonna, when we come back to Malcolm. I know I'm not. I'm so looking forward to play mine. I'm not gonna say anything about it, but man, I like mine. But so James, you said you made a couple. What's one of you mentioned? One was like a first responder or something.
I'm currently working on a character with a Norse background attached to like the Norse gods, who has teleportation, healing, and some stat reduction boosting abilities, some physical stats, called First Responder. Definitely a support character, has no like offensive damaging abilities whatsoever. I also have made like a World War II tank called the Mountie. Canadian.
Canadian?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I'll probably make half a dozen more characters before Malcolm even starts thinking about running
No,
the game
Sean.
again.
No Black Archer 2. That's not happening.
No Black Archer.
Hey,
You
Sean,
missed it,
my
Sean.
healing arrows.
I'll make it just
Which
for
is-
you, Sean.
Which is one of those things with trappings, like literally you can have healing, but my only hero only in the form of arrows fire to people. I'm like, you could, but yeah. Yeah.
Definitely
That
have a
does-
negative PR reputation with that character.
Oh God, yeah.
That's so funny.
But yeah, I'm really I'm looking forward to revisiting that and doing it justice as far as that superhero game that was coming up, and hopefully our heroes will be there for it, and they're
Hey, can I ask you a question, Malcolm?
Sure.
Were you thinking of running that in the VTT now, or are we going to just do that theater of the mind?
I really think we're going to do it probably more theater of mind. That's one thing I learned that I got rid of, that I was really hooked up on the first time I was running it, the absolute need for a VTT. And I was like, I have been playing so many Savage World games, theater of the mind. And, though I know it started off as a miniature game, or that was primary focus, they have rules for you to do at theater of mind, and they've been working perfectly fine for us. And of course, there will be some maps that you can reference and so forth, but generally, yeah, it will be theater of mind for the most part. Yeah.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah, I
have a lot more confidence than I did at the time. Believe me, I was not very confident I could do it without the VT, without the virtual tabletop, and that just sort of aided me in my frustration with trying to make it work fluidly at the time. And then you're adding a baby coming in; it's all kind of weird. So,
well, I can tell you from what I learned. So I like the VTTs, but I found that when you're like running a VTT, especially when you're recording a show, combat, like you spend so much time looking at the VTT, moving everything around. A lot of the times the reality is, unless you are playing a hardcore tabletop type, like miniatures, like BattleTech, so much of like range and where you are can be narratively done almost all the time without having to have a map. I can see sometimes it's some systems maybe it's better for some, but I know in fact we've kind of moved to that in a lot of our stuff. Like Dragonbane, you guys are largely it's theater of the mind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's very cool. I'm looking forward to it. That's one of the big shows that we're going to do next year. I'm really
excited that James might play. Honestly,
I'm surprised for years telling us no.
Had I known, I knew. I just like I knew, but I was like, I'm not running Gold Spear anytime soon.
Had my phone not accidentally popped up your live stream 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't know any of this. I wouldn't know Malcolm's thinking about doing supers again. So it was completely
you would have heard it at some party before now, or some gathering before
or Geek Weekend.
Or Geek Weekend.
And speaking of, just for internal talk here, I just secured our place for Geek Weekend. It's not where we've gone the last couple of years, but it's still at Deep Creek, and I think it's one that maybe Chris had put up.
No, don't tell the listeners.
Yeah, sorry. Let's give you all these people. Well, I'm just saying it's one of the ones that he found. I think we got the house. It looks cool. It'll be fun.
I think the Dork Day guys are here. Don't.
So, yeah, looking forward to that. And just for announcements, also here, so we're going to be back in the studio recording, or not the studio, our own individual studios, doing Dragonbane next Tuesday. Nathan and I are off to Gen Con at the end of the month. So if you're going to be there, look for us. It'll be the two old guys wandering around lost, but we'd be happy to see folks. And it wouldn't be a show if I didn't at some point try to plug merchandise. So, hey, if you get a chance, first, like, subscribe, and follow us and wherever you catch our show. And if you'd like to learn more about us, you can go over here to our webpage. It's at the AARPGS.com. And we've got our episodes. You can learn more about our cast. read about a little bit of, and I've actually linked in our videos. We did interviews for each of the casts except for Tim. We still haven't interviewed Tim.
What?
But I know we still have not interviewed Tim after all this time.
It's a point of pride. It's a point of pride for him at this point. Just let it go.
And last but not least, you can drop off at our store. We've got some of our new Dragonbane merchandise. Plus, we've got all kinds of other stuff. If you'd like to show how cool you are and you're geek chic, as Nathan hates for me to say. But that's it. Hey, thanks everybody. James, thanks for coming on. It was
Thank you
good
so
having
much,
you
James.
on.
It was great having you.
Malcolm, again, you've been like
always great talking to you, James.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm gonna take the guest thing off next week and just like. No.
Hey guys, can we take a moment and can we wish James a happy early birthday?
Yes.
Oh yeah, sure.
Happy
Couple
early
couple
birthday.
weeks early, but thank you.
Well,
we don't know if we're gonna get you back on here.
That's
Okay?
right.
Happy birthday, James. If you're back here next week, we'll say it again.
Do you guys do this every week or every other week, or what's the
this
schedule?
is until we run out of ideas or something happens up. We're looking at doing this every Thursday. In fact, speaking of next Thursday, I think we're going to shift gears and we're going to see if we can insert into Alpha Buddhist. We're going to talk to Tyr if he's available. We're going to talk about the Alien RPG game. It's one that our group has played a lot of. We really like it. If you haven't caught it, Tyr ran one of our, he ran the, oh my gosh, Arcturan Apocalypse. And so we should talk a little bit about, and anyone else wants to hop on, talk about Alien, about being a player, about being a GM, about the system. Oh no. Now let's look at this. What on earth? Hold on. How do I make him like the focus of everything?
Don't do that. Don't have the weird head. We're still.
I don't want to say this, but he looks like was it Zombie from
No,
Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
Yeah,
There it is.
Oh my God.
Help! I'm in the dark zone. I found
Where are
Jarrell.
you? Out in the middle of the woods.
I found Jarrell.
Garth Marenghi's dark place.
it's like
No,
Oh,
I'm-
my
that witch.
I thought you had jumped already. So, hi everybody. I'll be back next week. Just a disembodied head down.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Hey, be kind to each other, play games. You're never too old to roll, and we'll see you next
Never too
time on Leftovers.
Take care, everybody.
Later, guys.
See ya.
Bye. Hi.
Hey,